All right, everyone. Today we have a really interesting guest. So we have Rose Wang from Bluesky, and she's the Chief Operating Officer of Bluesky, which is a very rapidly growing social network. So Rose, can you give us a little bit of information about Bluesky and how you guys have rapidly grown in the last, I don't know, 10 months, a year? Yeah.
Hi, Randy. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be at South by this year. This is our first year here because Bluesky is actually only 1 year old. And we opened to the public February of last year. And we've grown to 32 million users in 1 year. And to give you a comparison, Twitter, I think, grew to about 1 million users in 2 years.
That's crazy.
So here's a comparison. And so why are all these people flocking to Bluesky? And at the end of the day, I think it comes down to they're having a good time. They feel it's safe. And then they actually are making friends again versus just talking into the void. And why is that happening? It's because on Bluesky, you're not tied to one algorithm that you have no control over. Here, there's about 100,000 different feeds that users have created. Some are algorithmic, some aren't. And what we've learned is that people actually want choice, that you don't have one mode of being. Maybe in the morning, you just want to wake up and talk to your cat feed friends.
Right.
And then you maybe want to go check the news later that day. And so what we're giving people is choice. And when you actually find people with similar interests in these cozier corners, much more like a subreddit interaction, you actually make friends. And so I think that's what people are having such a good time. That's why they're coming and flocking to Bluesky, simply from the fact that they're just feeling like their lives are improved.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the most rapidly growing kind of user growth stories that you can hear of these days. So that's very impressive. And I know you kind of so you focus on the operation side of things. And one of the challenges when you have this rapid growth is how do you keep, uptime? How do you make sure the services are running? How do you think about employee acquisition and hiring? And how do you kind of sustain and manage the business while you have this rapid user growth?
Yeah, so what's really funny is that people think we're this huge company, but there were 20 people. Even though, operations is in my name or my title, I think we all kind of do everything. Maybe the only thing I don't do is write code. And I actually think that that's what you want in an early company. You don't want me to just focus on operations and, the product engineers just to focus on the app. I think when you have a small team where we can kind of coordinate across, well, what are we going to be doing at South by, and how does that actually factor into what publishers want, and how does that go into the product, that we're the same team that puts all of this together. And so, as we experience this crazy growth, in fact, I believe since November, we went from maybe like 15 million to now 32 million. And so a lot of this growth happened in the last 3 months. And US specific, the focus has been, let's keep the app online. Let's keep it running. And I think in this time, though, it was a test for our protocol, which is, can something that's new and decentralized, which all it means is that not one group of people is making decisions, that essentially parts of the infrastructure, parts of the app, that many people can go and make a competing service. And that's how we have a more democratic system online. And so what we wanted to see is, can a technology like this stand up with 32 million people? And the answer is yes. And not only is it standing up, it's doing very well. And so it's proof that the way that we want the social web to work can work. And not only that, but we don't have to build it ourselves, that anyone else can build the TikTok or Instagram of the atmosphere, and we can share this world together. And we've proven to developers that we can build for hundreds of millions of people. And so they should be building on top of our technology.
Interesting. And so when you kind of think through, okay, so we're basically trying to manage the uptime, manage all these algorithms, and then you as an individual kind of running, obviously not just operations, but kind of a little bit of everything. How do you decide, okay, this is something I'm going to own and this is something I'm going to delegate down to the few people you have on your team? How do you kind of decide, I want to own this or I'm actually going to delegate this down to other people?
Yeah, the name of the game is prioritization always.
Yeah.
I think that oftentimes you can feel like there's a million things to do, and you can always do those things, but I think in a startup, you have to honestly get 1 to 2 things right, and everything else you can kinda just let go. And so for how we make decisions, so much of it is what is the end goal that we care about? And for us, it's always been end user. We care so deeply that the everyday person has a great time on Blue Sky. And so everything is about that experience. And so when we think about, okay, well, what is going to make sure that end users have the best experience? It's making sure that they can actually feel safe online. So we've put moderation as a priority. When most social apps probably think of moderation as a cost center or something they have to do. And so you actually experience it as such because it's not the first priority of the company. And so then your concerns come later. And so for Blue Sky, we've already put forward lots of safety features like detaching the quote post from the original post. And that's a really interesting way where you don't have to propagate negative news or like express dissent through continuously taking an original post and sharing it over and over again. Or things like when you're in the comment section, we're putting toxic comments or rude comments below the folds so you don't see them. And so like these little product features really just at the end of the day, it's about what makes users have a good time. And so when we think about, well, what are the first things we're going to do first? It always comes down to, well, what make sure that people has a good time.
Fair, fair. And one of the ideas around moderation, so obviously it's been a challenge for companies. I know Facebook said they were going to downsize their moderation, move to what, X's community notes model. And do you think that reason so many companies have struggled with moderation, is it just hard to figure out where to draw a line, or do you feel that like people are moving to community notes just to save on money, or what's the kind of thought process?
Yeah, so first of all, we love community notes. And so in general, I think when we think about moderation, it's basically like, what do you need to do to provide a safe experience? And it's kind of crazy to me to think that we say that there's only one solution for that. It'd be like offline or in the real world saying like, oh, we're only going to have firefighters, but no police department. And so ultimately, the question is, what are the various different ways, systems, people, and great product features that enable that safety or like incentivize people to behave in a more positive way. And so community notes isn't a very important part of that, where people can share their different viewpoints on a certain piece of information. And so you have the public as one forcing function for like understanding information, but that doesn't mean that you don't also have content moderators who are reviewing posts and accounts that are also problematic. And so what we believe it is, here's a toolbox of safety features and services that we should all tap into because it takes more than one to keep a society safe.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. Very interesting. And then as a company, so a lot of the standard model, I know Zuckerberg would always say that for him it was like monthly active users in the early days, and then he moved to daily active users, and kind of they go between in terms of how they look at their user flow. For you guys, is it the same thing? Is it like monthly active users, or do you look at minutes on this platform, or how do you guys think through what's the right metric to assess if you're doing a good job with content moderation, with the algorithms, with the making it easy for people to do it? How do you kind of say, okay, we're doing a good job?
Yeah, great question. I do think how you measure is basically what your app turns into,
Right.
because
Yeah.
that's essentially how you drive all the product features towards this metric. And so I think it's actually really important not to just look at one metric. So, is MAU important? Absolutely. Is DAU important? Absolutely. It's some sort of signal on the health of your product. But something else that we look at Blue Sky is how many people are following more than 10 people. That's a really interesting metric for us to see, where it's actually who's actually engaged, who's actually making friends. And what's interesting about people who follow more than 10 people is they tend to be 2 times more engaged. And so at the end of the day, what we're learning is people want to stay on a platform because of the other people.
Correct.
And because of the other connections that they've made. And so much of what we think about is what does it take for people to build connection and actually make friends again?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. You get more diversity of opinions. If you have two people you're following and they don't post that day, you have nothing on the platform to kind of
Totally.
see.
And also, I think that we think that somehow like people posting or that they um, or that somehow like shouting into the void your opinion is going to change people's minds. And we've learned that that's not actually how people change their minds, right? It's some combination of like meeting people that they're familiar with or people that they know deeply who have a different viewpoint and they start moving them in a more adjacent way rather than like two directly opposing people trying to change their minds.
Correct.
And so I think we've seen why social networks have created more polarization because I don't think we were ever meant to, as people, be in one entire like town square, not having any context on each other, shouting at each other, which is not how humans work.
Right. Yeah. So do you think that the polarization that you see it's happening on platforms where they focus a lot on engagement and retention is because people just want to see things that they like, and they're going to like people with similar viewpoints with similar posts. Do you think that's kind of what's causing the bubble effect right now that people see in social, where they really are not exposed to ideas outside of their core kind of beliefs?
Yeah, I do think that for most people, you want to take people on a journey. It's just like we actually think a lot about games and how games bring people from, a beginning to uh, a new part of the journey. And it's some sort of like side quest that they discover something new. But I think it's really hard to take people from a belief that they've had and ask them to change it immediately. And so on social media, I think that what we've seen is actually a lack of choice. And so at the end of the day, here's a story. So for so long, users really wanted Facebook to change their feed to chronological. And Facebook said, no, we don't want to do this because when we look at the data, uh, people tend to engage better on the algorithmic feeds. And so Blue Sky has a chronological feed. And what we found is that people love the chronological feed because they're actually discovering content that's not suppressed by the algorithm, right? That's just like based on people that they follow. What happened is then Threads, after all these years, has changed to a chronological feed.
Yeah.
After Blue Sky showed that this is something that users want and they actually get enjoyment out of. And so I think this type of competition and this type of pressure shows that the way that we've done social media up till now is not necessarily what people want. It's just that it's been really hard to start a new social network and to compete. And so these social networks can kind of do whatever they want, and they oftentimes care about what the advertisers care about, not necessarily what the end users care about, because those are the people who are paying them the dollars.
Right.
And so because we get to start over at Blue Sky, we get to reimagine this world and actually put end users at the centerfold, and where all our incentives are directed at how do we make sure that the end user has a good experience.
Fair. And one of the things that's happening that's interesting is I think LinkedIn even recently added the video feed where you can do like the video vertical scroll kind of experience. X has it, Facebook has it, Instagram has it. So, and obviously TikTok is the. Do you guys feel that that's going to be a larger percentage of because obviously the Twitter, the social, the Blue Sky, the Threads are supposed traditionally more text based, and it was like short text posts, and now you're starting to see more videos. Do you feel that that's like a new transition, or you think it's going to stay like there's still going to be text is always going to be there as a source of like people are going to want both?
It's hard to say what's going to happen because I do think that Gen Alpha and Gen Z are very different from millennials and older generations. I think when we think about a global platform, I think we have to think about people in different countries, people across different generations actually have different preferences. So, for example, I do voice notes with my international friends. And when I try to send an American friend a voice note, they're like, this is so awkward. But it's true. And so, similarly on Blue Sky, I think this is the whole point about choice, where we do have a scrolling video feed, and we're actually about to come out with longer videos. Right now, we have 60-minute or 60-second videos, and now we're increasing that up to 3 minutes. Almost. And so we also recognize that more and more people want video. That's a form of content that people tend to consume information, but still, the journalist, the bloggers, the publishers are word cells, right? And they love the art of the word. And so we still also want to support them and make sure that there's a platform that they can go and reach their people. And different formats of content tend to tell different stories.
Correct.
And so I think the question again goes back to, why do we have to only have one thing? It's all about choice.
Yeah. Interesting. And then I know there's been kind of a question around the putting links in posts, and I think pretty much across the board, you're starting to see people post and then they put links in comments to not destroy the algorithmic boost on links. Obviously, as a platform, if you're looking at your metrics, the more links there are in the post, the more people are going away from the site, so it actually reduces your minutes. Um, how do you guys think about it on Blue Sky, since you guys have that optionality? Can people just say like, oh, I'm going to do like a link focused feed and see links, or how does it work?
Yeah, so on Blue Sky, because we don't do advertising the way that other social platforms do advertising, we're not incentivized to lock people into Blue Sky. We actually want people to use Blue Sky as a lobby to discover the rest of the web. And so we don't depromote links. We don't punish links. We actually are very encouraging of links and want Blue Sky to be one of the best link experiences on the web, but just go rabbit hole, all the way back around. And so I was just talking to The Onion last night, and they said that they had more subscribers from Blue Sky than anybody else last month. In general, what we're seeing is that publishers, anybody who wants to go and create their own presence, that wants to build their own audience rather than being tied to the algorithm or the platform, they should be building their presence on Blue Sky because they own it. And so they can go if you're a stand-up comedian and you're posting a bunch of funny jokes, as soon as you try to send people to your stand-up comedy show, that post gets completely downranked and you can't send people there. And you're like, I've done all this work for the platform where I'm posting funny content. And as soon as I want them to come to my thing, I get punished. That's crazy. And so on Blue Sky, we're saying, no, you go build your audience.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you want to have that comedy show or you want to go support somebody else, all your followers subscribe to you and they'll get that notification. And we're not messing with the algorithm where then we're hiding your content.
Fair. So my next question is around kind of things that you learned or things you do differently today. So as you've gone through this crazy growth, as you said, what have you learned along the way that maybe at the beginning you kind of underappreciated, and now you're like, oh, we should have done like that. We should have done it like that, or I should have known this kind of piece of advice actually was relevant at that time.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot. Running a startup, you're definitely flying the plane.
Yeah.
As you're building it, and so there's definitely a lot of mistakes that we've made, but I think one of the most obvious ones and that we're correcting for now is for the last year. I think that most people don't really understand Blue Sky. They just know it as this very fancy tech type of thing, and there's like these words like protocol and decentralization, and they're like, what? And so I really wish that from the beginning we had talked about Blue Sky in like terms and analogies that people understand. And so for marketers, I think you guys can all understand it's about translating and speaking to people in a language, in a story form that they understand. And so this is kind of a call out, but if there's any marketers out there who are like, I have a really good way to tell the story, like, please get in touch with us. We very much believe that Blue Sky is built for the people by the people. And so, come build with us, come tell the story with us.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, I think the challenge with branding is it evolves, but people, the way you want to message, the way you want to phrase things, as you kind of find your perfect value proposition, is gonna change as well.
Yeah.
But that's cool. That's a cool piece of advice there. Um, and then I was gonna say, we're kind of closing out. Yeah, closing out on the last thing is around how do you think through growth? Like, how do you think through I mean, obviously you have natural growth that's coming in organically. And so the last question is around like, what are the things you kind of think through? Like, okay, how do we sustain this insane growth?
I love this question about growth because I think it goes back to product market fit.
Yeah.
And what I've experienced in Blue Sky is that product market fit is some combination of a little bit of science and a lot of timing, a lot of luck, and a lot of good execution to capture moments opportunistically. And um, so much of Blue Sky has been events happening around us and us capturing the traffic and the attention that has come our way. But the other thing that's happened with Blue Sky is we are very much a community-run, community-based type of social media platform. I think a lot of people think of us as just Twitter, but really we're a subreddit and Twitter interaction model where there's 100,000 different feeds. And in fact, many of these are communities.
Interesting.
Like so many of our sports folks, like we have now NBA and NLE and football, NFL, but they all started from a few wrestlers that we gave invite codes to about a year and a half ago.
Wow.
Uh, there are more science papers shared on Blue Sky than before Twitter hit. I think when Twitter hit 1 million users, they still had fewer scientific papers shared on Twitter than on Blue Sky today. And why is that? It's because we won over the science community. And so it's a scientist who runs the science feed. And she's brought on a bunch of scientists and they've done that community work. And so I still very much believe you got to empower the people, right? Like every day there are people who are trying to build community, who are trying to reach their audience, who have something to say. And you really have to talk to them and to understand, what do you need? And how do we build a platform, a toolbox for you? It's not about us. It's about you.
Interesting. I actually never heard of that subreddit meets Twitter idea. Maybe that's part of the new branding that you guys should do. That's a perfect, simple, clear analogy, and you figured it out on your own. I love that. I love that. Well, thanks a lot for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And it's very impressive. It's rare to see a company growing that quickly. So thanks a lot, Rose, for joining.
Thank you for having me, Randy.
Thank you. Thank you.